Tonight on Bridge City News, we hear from Lethbridge Police Chief Rob Davis, who explains why he's decided to step down as head of the LPS. There's been a lot of debate online as to the relevance of Arches, the city's supervised consumption site. We bring you the good and the bad. And Boycott Cineplex is trending on Twitter. It's in reaction to the theater company deciding to run the controversial pro-life film Unplanned, which opens in select theaters on Friday.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge Police Chief Rob Davis spoke to the media today about why he decided to step down as head of the Lethbridge Police Service. Davis will be leaving our city to pursue a similar role in Brantford, Ontario. He says that he's excited to return to the city of Brantford, where he grew up. Like Lethbridge, Brantford has a large Indigenous community.
With the rollout of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls recommendations, in southern Alberta here, I have complete faith in Chief Melting Tallow from Blood Tribe to look out for the interests of the Blackfoot communities and Indigenous people in general here in southern Alberta. At the end of the day, I am from Six Nations, and so my opportunity to be part of those discussions at the Ontario Association Chiefs of Police excites me, because this is such a critical time in our history of policing with Indigenous people, with the TRC, now with the MMIW recommendations, that I really believe I can make an impact.
We certainly will miss his innovation, and we hope that as the Police Commission recruits another chief, that we get someone who's equally dedicated and equally creative.
The WATCH program, the Community Peace Officer program, the SMART squad, there's a number of things that he's brought forward, and I think there's more things coming as well. That are part of negotiations that I can't go into, that certainly he will have a strong legacy in his 4.5 years here.
The Lethbridge Police Commission has not announced any of the candidates for the new position. Davis's last day will be September the 30th. There's been strong reaction on social media in regards to the safe injection and consumption site here in Lethbridge. Many came out to protest Arches over the weekend with concerns that our city's downtown core is deteriorating. Others have been very much in support of the work Arches is doing. Now here's some of the most recent comments from our Facebook page, both positive and negative. Lucretia writes, Arches provides so much more than just safe injection and consumption of drugs. There's only one aspect of what they do, and I think they are doing the best they can with what they have. Cindy writes, move the safe consumption site into City Hall and let the mayor deal with them all and all of the needles laying around. Derek says they are the first line of defense in a complicated and growing opioid epidemic. Without their work, our community would be in a much worse place with much more death and tragedy. John simply says, move it, as in Arches, to the garbage dump. We're also hosting an online poll via Twitter which asks, do you feel Arches is doing an effective job in our city? Log on to Twitter and let us know your thoughts. It appears as though local business owners are unhappy with Arches. Many say the areas around the site have seen an increase in crime and a decrease in safety and customers. Executive Director for the Downtown Lethbridge BRZ says the city needs to focus on more harm reduction for drug users before harm towards businesses can be reduced.
We know that the supervised consumption site is a place that has definitely impacted the business that are. We've actually met with a number of the businesses, although they're not in the downtown core. We had a number of meetings, one of which the city manager and some of the city staff were at, and we heard their concerns. It's definitely, as you are closer to the supervised consumption site, there's more issues related to that. In the downtown core, yes, we've always had some social issues here, but it's never going to be better, in my opinion, until the other pillars of harm reduction are in place: detox, intox, and supportive housing. We've heard very clearly that it's emotional. A lot of these are long-time, multi-generational businesses that are suffering because of their location. But we're hoping some of these other supports happen in our community soon enough.
Lethbridge City Council voted in favor to pay $7,500 to approve the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association's annual membership fee. Mayor Chris Spearman felt that it was important to support the group because of its impact on economic development.
The City of Lethbridge recognizes there are significant deficiencies with Highway 3. When funding announcements for highways were announced in April of 2017, nothing was announced for Highway 3, but funding was announced for highways across the province. We need to raise our advocacy profile. We need to work together as a region, and we need to make sure that the government clearly understands what our priorities are and our goals are with respect to Highway 3.
The committee stressed the importance of funding now to improve their social media presence and pay its employees instead of relying on volunteers. Dog owners know all too well how much of a challenge it can be to sleep during a nasty thunderstorm. Our pets' fear of thunder can be a tricky problem to solve. Fortunately, there are some solutions available.
Teaching their dog how to calm down, finding a safe haven, a place where the dog wants to naturally go, making that comfortable, predictable, and rewarding them. Once they have kind of that safe relaxation place, you could start some desensitization potentially, which is just playing very quiet storm noises and gradually increasing it. Can be a little hard because not all dogs respond just to the sound. Sometimes it's the pressure changes, the ozone, the rain, the lightning, all these other stimuli. So desensitization can be a little bit tricky.
Lupton says dogs with this condition often look to their owners for comfort, and many times they're simply inconsolable. She says it's important to stay positive. The Calgary Stampede and Whoop Up Days in Lethbridge are major attractions to Southern Albertans celebrating Western culture. A part of that includes what you wear. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, or city folk, there's a place in Lethbridge for you to suit up. Ainsley O'Reilly headed over to the Western Stockman to learn how to cowboy up.
With rodeo season comes rodeo attire. The Calgary Stampede is just a couple hours north, but tons of Southern Albertans head up to enjoy the action. Right now I'm at Western Stockman in Lethbridge, and they're gonna show me how to get my cowgirl on.
So what kind of style are you trying to achieve? Are you looking as if you're ready to go ride on a horse, or are you looking for the style where maybe there's like a country dance and you want to kind of dress up but still look like your ideal country person?
The ideal country person. Okay, I think that I want to ride a horse.
So we have our Cinch Linden trouser jeans right here. So as you can see, they've got the really flare leg, which is kind of what's coming back in style right now. And they're a little bit more high-waisted. So they're great for riding, but also if you want to tuck in a shirt, kind of wear more casually, if you're just walking around the rodeo or stampede, that would be an ideal kind of pant. This is definitely the style that we're seeing coming back in among the showgirls and just the different people walking around the different rodeo scenes. And this is the perfect kind of thing to wear out to like a dressier night, kind of Western country night.
Oh, okay.
Other folks.
So this is what I'm gonna wear on a line dancing night?
Yeah,
Is this what you're
yes,
telling me?
it's
Okay.
perfect line dancing material.
So I've been told that a lot of people wear their cowboy hats wrong.
Yes,
Which is the correct way to do it?
you want the shape in the front.
The shape. So
Yeah. So the front of it will be shaped like this, and then the back is usually just open.
is a flat bottom. So flat bottom in the back. What do you think? What do you
It
think?
looks good.
It's got the nice plain material, but it's got that beautiful pop of color with the embroidery on it, and they're super cute. You could wear them with skinny jeans after if you're not a cowboy, or...
I'm most definitely not a cowboy. Let's do this. So now I am literally dressed from head to toe. I got my hat, I got my fringe, I got my boots, and I am ready for the stampede.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
A world record was broken at the Calgary Stampede last night. High wire walker Nick Walenda walked on a wire 35 meters in the air above the midway and only stopped a few times along the 549-meter walk, waving to the crowd below. Walenda said the wind was a little unpredictable, which made him nervous, but he still completed the walk. Walenda wore a tether because of the audience below. If he fell, the tether would have caught him, preventing any injuries to the spectators. Despite backlash from groups across the country, a controversial anti-abortion film will be shown in Canadian theaters. Cineplex is now defending its decision to start screening the movie Unplanned starting this Friday. BCN's Loris Alexander hit the streets to find out what the Southern Albertans think.
Despite backlash, Cineplex has further defended its decision to screen the pro-life film Unplanned, which will be shown across Canada.
I think boycotting the Cineplex for the movie Unplanned goes against our freedom of speech rights. And by boycotting it, it makes it that the people who want to see it can't see it because the owners of the Cineplex are so scared to show it. And that's not fair for all of us who want to see it.
It's getting a lot of criticism for being pro-life, and there's been a lot of kind of bullying and silencing of any views that don't really agree with far left views.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of messed up, obviously, because, you know, in Canada, free speech and everything, everyone has their own opinion, entitled to their own opinion. And I think that to kind of get so riled up over a movie, especially, is kind of silly. It's really pretty silly, because in the end, that's all it is it's a movie. And I think that movies are just kind of people's ways of expressing their opinions.
In a statement, President and CEO of Cineplex, Ellis Jacobs, says, "I understand and can appreciate the concerns about the film, but it is up to each of us to decide whether or not we want to see it." For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
RCMP and Red Cliff are investigating a hit and run. Police say the incident occurred last night around 9 o'clock on Highway 1 just east of Medicine Hat. A male cyclist was struck and left on the side of the road until a motorist discovered him and called 911. The cyclist was airlifted to a hospital in Calgary with life-threatening conditions. If you have any information that could help police with their investigation, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. All of Canada's premiers will be congregating in Saskatchewan this week to discuss the economy, trade, and health care. The Council of Federation Conference starts at Big River First Nation, where the premiers are to meet with leaders of national Indigenous organizations, including the Assembly First Nations. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says in addition to trade and the need to further develop the energy sector, he'll be pushing for jurisdictions to mutually recognize professional credentials so workers can more easily move between provinces. A carbon monoxide leak at a Super 8 motel in Winnipeg sent 46 people to hospital today. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says at least 15 people are in critical condition. Emergency crews were called to the motel at 10:19 in the morning when an alarm showed there was a carbon monoxide gas leak. Manitoba Hydro shut off gas to the building and is working to determine the cause. Fire officials say the building has since been completely ventilated. A Democratic congresswoman from Texas alleges the Department of Homeland Security is engaged in a cover-up. Sheila Jackson Lee made the comment after an Inspector General's report found poor conditions and dangerous overcrowding at Texas border stations.
I am sick and tired of a natural and man-made disaster being created by this administration and an inactive Department of Homeland Security that is doing nothing but whining about not having money. By the way, they had money they could reprogram, but we just gave them $4.6 billion of American taxpayer dollars, and they've done nothing. What I think is important is that the Judiciary Committee and Homeland Security committees that I am on are looking now to delve into what kind of cover-up, bad actions and words are impacting innocent families trying to seek relief, desperate from gangs, violence, domestic violence, which, by the way, this administration, with no explanation, took away as a reason to come when we have had this for decades.
Foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says when it comes to illegal border crossers, the Trump administration says a crackdown is vital.
You had every single Democrat candidate on stage on the second night of the Democrat debate saying that they want to give, first of all, that crossing the border is no longer considered illegal, and to give benefits to those individuals for their entire life. I mean, that's not a joke. Who's going to pay for all of this? This is very, very serious business. So, of course, there's a crackdown. Of course, any sovereign nation needs borders, needs laws, needs a robust immigration system.
Lisa will have more on the immigration crisis in the U.S., along with how the Taliban is creating havoc in Afghanistan. That interview is coming up after Business News. An 18th century Torah scroll, prayer books, and personal belongings of victims are all on display at one of the largest Holocaust museums in the world. As we hear in this next report, this one is located in the Ukraine.
3 stories and 4 halls. An exclusive display of 18th century Torah scroll, prayer books and personal belongings of ghetto captives and kids' toys. Before the Second World War, Ukraine's Jewish community was one of the most numerous in Europe. About 100,000 Jews were living in Dnipro before the Holocaust events. The city witnessed the onslaught of shootings right after the tragedy in Kiev's Babi Yar. There are several locations where the mass extermination took place, but the most notorious one is the Botanical Garden.
The warnings appeared everywhere, saying the Jews were to come to certain streets. People had been led to the Botanical Garden in columns, where in the beginning of October 1942, by various estimates, 12 to 15,000 people were massacred.
The main message of the museum's mere existence is that pain doesn't have a race or nationality. That's why the Holocaust is not the only thing that exhibits are devoted to, but also the history and culture of Ukrainian Jews are presented here as well. There are separate halls about Holodomor, the genocide history of Armenian and Gypsy people, and also the deportation of Crimean Tatars.
When Ukrainians, Russians, Polish and the rest view the Holocaust tragedy as their own, and the Jewish people understand the pain of Holodomor and terrorist deportation, then we come to realize the role of history in people's fates, and that it not only influences the present, but also determines both the present and the future.
The museum is very modern. It has various installations, multimedia zones with audio and video materials.
The mercury will be climbing by quite a bit this week, bringing lots of hot summer-like temperatures. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. A mix of sun and cloud today and mild. Tonight, a 30% chance of showers with a low near 13 degrees. Tomorrow, just a few clouds with a high near 27. A high-pressure system clears out the remaining clouds on Thursday, and we should see a high near 26. Friday, mainly sunny, with a temperature hovering around 27. A nice weekend is shaping up as well. Sunny at 29 on Saturday, clear sky at 27 on Sunday. Monday, just a couple of degrees cooler at 25. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 25 and an average low of 10. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1968 at 36 degrees, and the record low was 3 in 1999. Sunrise was at 5:34, sunset at 9:39. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria should receive rain and a high near 20. Showers and 18 is on tap for Vancouver. Thunder showers at 25 for Calgary on Wednesday. Light rain at 21 degrees for Edmonton. Just a few clouds at 26 for Regina tomorrow. Mainly sunny at 26 as well for Saskatoon. Some isolated showers at 24 degrees for Winnipeg. Mainly sunny and a humid 31 for Toronto tomorrow. 1 degree warmer, 32 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be mostly sunny at 28. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly sunny at 25. Just a few clouds for Charlottetown, PEI and 20. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain and a high near 17 tomorrow. Two environmental groups have filed a motion to delay a launch of a judicial review of Ottawa's approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. EcoJustice argues that Cabinet failed in its responsibility to protect endangered killer whales when it reapproved the project last month. The federal court last year struck down the previous approval ruling. Marine wildlife had not been considered, nor were Indigenous consultations completed. Margot Venton with EcoJustice says while Cabinet acknowledged marine threats, the approval still fails to mitigate their impacts on the endangered whales. Canada's Agriculture Minister used a stop in Yukon yesterday to highlight a 5-year, $15 million Northern Isolated Community Initiatives Fund. It is intended to support local community-led projects that reduce dependence on the southern food industry. One component, called Support for Northern Community Food Systems, is a $9 million investment providing funding in the north in order to build a strong territorial food industry. Another $3.5 million will provide money to territorial initiatives identified by the Northern Food Working Group, which was established under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. A growing number of startups are producing meat in a lab sparing animals from slaughter. They want to bring cell-based beef, poultry, pork, and fish to your table. As we discover in this next report, however, they face scrutiny from consumers, regulators, and food safety advocates.
Since we started working on chicken.
It looks like chicken, cooks like chicken, and tastes like chicken. But no chicken lost its life to make this cutlet. Memphis Meats is one of a growing number of startups worldwide that are producing meat from cells, which doesn't require slaughtering animals. They want to bring cell-based or cultured meat to your dinner table.
Yeah. We take cells from high-quality animals, we feed them with the nutrients that these cells need to become meat, and once they become meat, we harvest it, and we cook it into the products we love to eat.
In addition to chicken, deep fried in this demo, Memphis Meats has also made cell-grown duck and beef meatballs. It hopes to start selling its products within 2 years. San Francisco-based New Age Meats is producing cell-based pork, which was prepared as sausage for this tasting.
So people want meat, they don't want slaughter. And so we make slaughter-free meat. And we know there's a massive market for that people that want delicious meat that doesn't require animal slaughter.
But these startups face some significant challenges to bringing cultured meat from the lab to the marketplace. They must win approval from government regulators, assuring consumers that their products are safe to eat. And they must bring down the cost of cultured meat, which is still extremely expensive to produce. New Age Meats is developing a new type of bioreactor to produce cell-grown meat at an industrial scale.
How can you go from the tiny meatball to producing the amount of meat that one cow has, which is like maybe 800 pounds or so? That's the real challenge.
We got the northern bluefin. Finless Foods is developing fish and seafood that can be produced on land, no fishing required. The process begins in the lab, where scientists coax fish cells to multiply and grow into meat. The startup created its first cell-based fish in 2017, which has served as fish cakes at this private tasting. It's focused on producing a cell-based version of bluefin tuna, which is overfished and contains high levels of mercury.
The ocean is a very fragile ecosystem, and we are really driving it to the brink of collapse. And so we think by moving human consumption of seafood out of the ocean and onto land and creating it in this cleaner way, we can basically do something that's better for everybody.
As global demand for meat grows, backers say cultured meat is more sustainable than traditional meat because it doesn't require the land and resources needed to raise livestock, a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Cultured meat companies are facing resistance from livestock producers who are lobbying to restrict what can be labeled meat. The startups must also show government regulators that their products are safe to eat. But perhaps the toughest task will be convincing consumers.
It's not clear that the consumers having the choice, they will choose for lab-grown meat.
Meat going in the pan.
These startups believe they can change those eating habits one bite at a time. Terry Che, Associated Press.
The annual pace of housing starts or construction last month beat analysts' expectations. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation is reporting an adjusted annual rate of 345,657 units in June, which is up around 50,000 from May. Economists had expected around 210,000 starts. The increase came as the rate of urban starts increased by 26%. Condos, apartments, and townhomes were up by 31%. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, there has been a very strong online reaction on our Facebook page in regards to the recent protest at Arches, the Lethbridge Safe Consumption and Injection site. Get active on social media and let us know your thoughts if Arches is helping or being a hindrance in our community. Visit Bridge City News on Facebook and let your voice be heard. The U.S. is preparing to ship out close to 1 million undocumented immigrants. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out to Galt Gardens and enjoy Shakespeare in the Park 2019 every Thursday and Friday from now until August 9th. The Lethbridge Shakespeare Performance Society presents the action-packed and exciting play Macbeth. Suitable for all ages, shows are free for an opportunity to donate. Experience the timeless magic of one of Shakespeare's best-known plays. For more information, call Kate at 403-329-4568. The Willow Creek Gospel Music Jamboree is taking place July 26th to the 28th in Grantham, Alberta. Come out and enjoy live gospel music by the Liberty Quartet, Rosette, Prairie Joe, the Fort Macleod Alliance Worship Group, and more. Plus, Daryl Jans will return as MC. For more information, visit gospelmusicjamboree.com. The Gem of the West Museum in Coaldale is hosting an open house on Heritage Day, August 5th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Take in ice cream making, crafts for the kids, a scavenger hunt, and more. It's fun for the whole family, and admission is by donation. For details, visit gemofthewest.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Recent moves by Iran is intensifying pressures on Europe to find an effective way around U.S. sanctions that blocked Iran's oil sales overseas. To tell us more about this and other big stories from around the globe is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, this all began with Iran earlier abandoning the limit on its low-enriched uranium stockpile. The Islamic nation has announced a new breach of nuclear limits. Tell me more about that.
Right, and here we all thought that their nuclear program was for peaceful purposes, as they said it was. Guess it's not. This looks really bad. Yes, the U.S. pulled out of that nuclear deal in May of last year. It put the Europeans in a very, very awkward position because they don't want to turn their backs on the U.S., but they didn't want to turn their backs on this deal. Now, when you have the Iranians going against their word and actually declaring that they're increasing their uranium production, where does that really put the Europeans? But still, you have Macron meeting with the Iranians soon to discuss any ways to salvage this deal. He announced that they're going to have a July 15th meeting. It looks like they're willing to take any bad deal, but at what cost? I don't think the Europeans are in a place economically where they can turn their backs on the U.S., on the West, in favor of a deal with Iran.
The British ambassador has criticized the Trump administration as clumsy and inept through leaked memos. And Lisa, Trump has hit back saying those comments do not really serve the UK very well.
Yeah, we've heard worse that hasn't been leaked, that has been publicly said. So, it's interesting that this keeps going on and on. That's the character he is. He brings about this very unprofessional behavior in a lot of people, whether it's journalists that have to stay impartial and they don't, or heads of state that should stay professional and don't. And in this case, it's just that. It's a leaked memo. Yeah, I don't know if it really was leaked or if it was purposely said. And Trump, of course, had a rebuttal, and he thinks that this guy is not suited to play the role that he does, that he hasn't done anything good for his country. And of course, the UK is in a very precarious place right now politically, so not sure they should be the ones hurling comments over to the US, but they do anyway. And Trump could hold his own. That's all I could say.
Oh, that's right. He'll never back down from a fight. The issue of illegal border crossers continues in the United States, and a new report says the government is ready to deport 1 million undocumented immigrants.
Yes. This is a report that said, the U.S. is really cracking down. Obviously, we have a problem with illegal immigrants, with the migrants crossing over the border currently, with the detention centers, and also with homelessness across our cities. I know in Los Angeles, it's a major problem where we have typhoid and other illnesses that are prevalent in areas like downtown Los Angeles, in San Francisco and other places, and it's awful. These are, a lot of children and a lot of professionals at risk here that go to work in those major city hubs every single day. So, there is a major effort to crack down on illegals, and ICE has said they will do whatever it takes to make sure that those individuals here are legally documented or here, within the U.S. legal process to become documented. look, this is not a new story. This is not something that was that sprouted up overnight or just during the Trump presidency. This is something that the U.S. has always dealt with, but it just obviously is being underscored right now because of the migrant crisis, because of the overflow, and because of this push by the left to give everything to everyone, and the country just cannot sustain it. You had every single Democrat candidate on stage on the second night of the Democrat debate saying that they want to give, first of all, that crossing the border is no longer considered illegal, and to give benefits to those individuals for their entire life. I mean, that's not a joke. Who's going to pay for all of this? This is very, very serious business. So, of course, there's a crackdown. Of course, any sovereign nation needs borders, needs laws, needs a robust immigration system.
In oil-rich Venezuela, Lisa, fuel shortages have sparked some man-made famines. Tell me more about that.
Not the first time we're hearing about famines in Venezuela, but this is a new headline to say that every time there is a shortage, there is a new crisis, whether it's a food shortage or fuel shortage or a political crisis that sends the country into spiraling down. Nothing new, but we've heard nothing new from Guaido, the interim president that had been meeting with the United States, and nothing new from the Maduro regime. So that's when you know that the country will remain in this stalemate, and the people suffer. The humanitarian crisis does not stop. It keeps continuing on, and we hope for some relief for those individuals living there.
Now, a country I had the pleasure of visiting last year, we chatted about it in previous shows, was Cuba and Veradero. Such beautiful scenery, the people are so friendly. It's also a country, like many others, which has its fair share of problems. Cubans, Lisa, are now using social media to complain.
Yes, I actually thought about you when I saw this headline, Hal, and how lucky you were to have visited Cuba before it got to a place where we can't visit. I also had one of my interns visit Cuba, and his first reaction was that it was great, it was awesome, but I couldn't send you any photos or any videos or upload anything because the internet there is awful. The service is either non-existent or poor, and now that they are beginning to get some sort of internet service, it is extremely expensive and exorbitant. So people are taking to social media to tell the world of their grievances, that they should bajen los precios del internet, to lower the internet prices, because they want to communicate with the world. You know, wherever you have a country that is politically isolated, the best way to keep the people's minds isolated is to cut the internet or to make it extremely difficult for people to have access to the rest of the world. It usually ends up in something like what we saw in Iran, the Green Revolution, also called the Twitter Revolution, because people have access to information, to organization, to other people, to other ideas, etc. So no surprise here, but I hope that the rest of the world does listen and something is done for the Cuban people.
That's also a big issue in China as well. When I talk to some of my friends who are working overseas there, Beijing, it's really tough with the social media. Talks between the United States and the Taliban, Lisa, are on pause after their most productive season yet. The Afghan talks with the Taliban reflect a changed nation.
Yeah, this is a confusing headline, right, Hal? We always talk about different attacks of the Taliban in Afghanistan, reminding us of their presence, reminding us of the violence that they're willing to use and to what extent they're willing to use it, to go to schools and to go to coffee shops and to wait until, the end of Ramadan so that they can have more people congregated at an ice cream shop in order to have higher number of casualties. This is the group where the U.S. is meeting with, and the international community wants to basically entrust the future of Afghanistan into the hands of the Taliban because we don't have another partner there. How is this significant? How has this been our most productive season? I don't know. I don't know what's going on at the negotiating table with the Taliban, but apparently talks will go forward, and they're considered quite successful, or at least somewhat successful, and we'll see where this puts the people of Afghanistan, who have had no relief from this type of life for decades.
And speaking of the Taliban, a Taliban car bomb hit an intelligence compound in Afghanistan, Lisa, killing at least 12 and wounding school kids.
Exactly right. So this is more of the same, right? So how can we have headlines like these where the Taliban, who will be entrusted with the future of this nation, can't take care of its constituents, school children? So there's no empathy here. There's no conscience here. They kill and they will make themselves known. So whether they're doing this as a tactical measure in order to gain followers and to gain the loyalty of the people of Afghanistan, one doesn't know. But the fact that they're willing to use this type of violence and continue during these talks, that's, I think, what's more puzzling. If you are in talks with a world power in order to talk about the future of Afghanistan, you would think they would show some more respect for the people of Afghanistan, and at least in the interim, create a peaceful environment.
More conflict in Hong Kong with the latest extradition bill protests. Lisa, Chinese tourists are looking on in amazement as Hong Kong protesters march right through the city, and a lot of them too.
Yes, this was a big one. And it broke after 11 p.m., which is very interesting. I think people were waiting for some sort of news to break or to see if something would change. But the people of Hong Kong are not backing down. They will not accept this bill. And China obviously won't back down. I think we know that well here in the United States with regards to the ongoing talks between President Trump and China. But it looks like everything is in limbo. And until there is some sort of resolution between the U.S. and China, it doesn't look like anything in that part of the world will be settled quite yet. I think for the interim, China has difficulty, not difficulty because they're always willing to chest thump, but difficulty truly setting the pace for the future because they don't know where they stand. So I think this turmoil between China and the U.S. has created an opportunity for others to be heard. So whether it's Taiwan or South Korea or Hong Kong, we're hearing a lot of grievances. And I think this is an opportune time for Hong Kong to protest, to come out. They're beating the protesters. They are cracking down on the protesters, but I haven't heard anything too crazy just yet. And I think that the people in Hong Kong will continue to have their voices heard.
Now here's kind of a twisted story. Organs of executed prisoners in Iran could be sold under a new law? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. Unofficially, I've heard that this has happened often, and not because this was prisoners, but because of the economy. People selling their organs has been, a big market in Iran. People volunteering to do so, to put food on their table for their loved ones, etc. Now this might actually turn into something that can be done through the prison system. Of course, we're not surprised. I mean, we are surprised because it's disgusting, but we're not surprised in the sense that human rights has been nothing that the Iranian government has ever followed before. And for a while, there was some sort of break, pause, lax attitude towards cracking down on the people because Iran just couldn't afford that negative publicity back at home while having, the heightened tensions with the West. Now it seems that they find themselves in a much more confident place where they not only saber rattle in the region and against the U.S., they are talking back to everyone. And at home, it looks like they're ready to crack the whip once again. So for a brief period of time, I think, the people of Iran, of course, the economy has been abysmal. The sanctions have been very hard hitting. But with regards to these types of human rights abuses, they've had a small little pause, and now it looks like it's beginning once again.
So Lisa, I'm here in Canada, home of the Toronto Raptors. You're in Los Angeles, home of the Lakers and the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard, our big star in the NBA playoffs, bringing the only championship to Canada, bolts Canada and signs with the LA Clippers. Were you surprised?
Very surprised. I wasn't surprised that he came to Los Angeles, but I was surprised that he came to the Clippers over the Lakers. My husband couldn't be happier. I think it's a great way to balance out the teams. If he had gone to the Lakers, it would have been entirely stacked. Wouldn't have been a fun season to watch. And we just watched the Clippers get very close. They were in the finals, actually. So it was a very exciting time for those Clippers fans who've been waiting decades to see something from the Clippers. But they're a hardworking team. They work very hard. They don't have that one superstar. Now they do, and they will work very well with him, I'm sure. But it'll make basketball here in Los Angeles and across the NBA play. Very exciting, and I'm sure the Raptors will continue to do well and to hopefully have that high morale off of their big win.
Oh yeah, they'll still be the beasts of the East, you can be sure of that. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me from Los Angeles, home of the Clippers. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
The United States, Canada, and Western society in general has been experiencing a cultural war around various moral issues. We want to tackle some of those today with Dr. Michael Brown, host of the nationally syndicated Line of Fire radio program and author of the new book coming out in August entitled Jezebel's War with America, The Plot to Destroy Our Country, and What We Can Do to Turn the Tide. Dr. Brown, welcome to BCN.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So what inspired you to write this book for all of us across North America?
Yeah, I'm not one that's into conspiracy theories, and I'm not one, spiritually speaking, that's looking for a demon under every rock. But sometimes the light goes on and you connect the dots and you see what looks like all separate things happening in the culture wars and realize, there's actually a spiritual connection between them. So it was just last year the light went on for me, thinking about Jezebel in the Bible, probably the most wicked woman mentioned in Scripture. And a woman that was very powerful. She killed the prophets. She led the nation of Israel into idolatry. She emasculated men. She was a violent person. You could call her a radical feminist. She's associated with witchcraft, immorality. And I just started to think, wait a second. Think of what we're dealing with in North America today. You've got a spirit of idolatry turning away from the one true God. You've got sexual seduction like we've never had it before with porn, even 8-year-olds downloading it. You've got the rise of radical feminism. I don't mean equal pay for a woman doing the same work. I don't mean proper respect for women. I mean a radical male-hating feminism. With that, emasculating of men. You've got a militant baby-killing spirit, not just struggling over the issue of abortion for a 15-year-old girl who was raped, but the shout your abortion militant spirit. You have the rise of witchcraft. In America today, there are more witches than there are Presbyterians. You've got the silencing of prophetic voices through the intimidation of fear. And I began to look at these things and said, wait a second. These are not all separate, unrelated issues in the culture. The war on gender is another one, turning men into women and women into men. I realized the same demonic forces, the same spiritual forces that were at work through Jezebel 3,000 years ago were at work again today. And if we can wake up to this and see what we're dealing with, then in a much more strategic and clear-headed and holistic way, we can expose Jezebel and bring her down.
So there's a cultural battle taking place in many Western civilizations, including here in Canada and where you are in the United States. We see it in political, educational, social circles, but you say it's much more than that. You believe it ultimately boils down to a spiritual battle?
Yeah, look, people are responsible for what they do. No one can say the devil made me do it. We all make daily choices. And there are cultural things going on that have cultural explanations, but it goes beyond that. If anyone believes the Bible to be true, the Bible speaks about spiritual warfare. The Bible speaks about a real devil. And when you look at some of the cultural shifts, right now in Canada, for example, there's a father. If he refers to his 14-year-old daughter as his daughter or as she, he can instantly go to jail for that, and he cannot prevent her from starting to transition to become a male. You think, how did that become something that's now being enforced on a national level? And when did we have to deal with some of these same things just one generation back? Were we dealing with this radical feminist attitude so that just being a man makes you somehow guilty, that just wanting to be a good husband and father, it's now toxic masculinity? Where did these things come from? How is it that we have porn on such epidemic levels out of control? Yeah, I know there are sociological explanations, but I'm saying there is more to it. There really is a spiritual battle. And for me, the more I understand this, the more I love people. Because I realize the same devil that hates me, hates lesbians, hates atheists, hates Muslims, hates Christians, he hates everyone and wants to destroy. It gives me more love for people and more ability to stand for what's right because I recognize this is something that's ultimately destructive for our society. It's not for our betterment. It's only for our worst ends.
Now, one of the concerns you bring up is radical feminism, which you see as something that really demeans motherhood. It really deplores the traditional family unit and despises males. Where are you seeing this happening in society today?
Well, if you look at the political landscape, say in America, since President Trump came into power, whether you like President Trump or you loathe President Trump, with him coming into power, we've seen now this empowering of women with women's marches that are not just about we don't like the president's sexism or he was a misogynist or things like that. No. With it is this idea we're going to blow up the White House and decapitate the president. You think, where does it come from with such anger, with such hostility? And with the rise of feminism, what you're seeing, and I documented in Jezebel's War with America, the rise of witches. In fact, you have one group after another saying, yeah, there's a connection between feminism and witchcraft, and there's a witch in every woman that feminists want to bring up. So rather than having a healthy appreciation for the differences in the sexes, and the unique contribution that we each make and how we need each other. There's an emasculating of men. There's a frontal attack on, say, fathers and dads. Just look at the way we're constantly portrayed for years now in the sitcoms and popular movies. We're the idiots and the jerks and the ones that are just bungling things and getting in the way. And every man is kind of a rapist at heart. These are the exaggerated pictures that are being put forward. And I'm just saying the dots all connect spiritually.
Now, in most churches, you will also see far more women in attendance than men. Now, is this a telltale sign that men need to return to the tradition of leading their home spiritually?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank God for spiritually minded women. You know, a lot of people say, well, in the Bible, Eve fell first. Well, in the Bible, Jesus revealed himself to women after his resurrection, and they believed before the men. But that being said, yes, there is a calling for men in a godly and loving way to lead their homes, to be the heads of the home. You know, it was pointed out when we had a terrible hurricane in Houston and people were flooded, that the men were driving down in their boats trying to rescue the women who were clinging to the children. In other words, everyone was doing what was very natural to do. We can't even have this now. And often in the church, men have been so spiritually castrated. They don't want to take a stand. They're so intimidated by fear. Sadly, many of our pastors are afraid to speak up on controversial issues because the costs are high, or maybe you'll get unfriended on Facebook. But what we have to do to defeat Jezebel, who castrates males, is for men to stand up, not in some macho way that we're the tough guys. No, but taking our spiritual responsibility, our leadership responsibility, and nurturing and caring for our families. And the more we're slaves to porn, the more we're slaves to fear, the less we'll be able to do that.
Many today view the pro-life position as being anti-woman. Millions of unborn babies have been aborted in the name of choice. Now, you say the spirit of Jezebel views babies as unwanted intrusions?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's remember that in the ancient world, in the biblical world, when you had idolatry, you also had sacrificing of babies. This was widely practiced. Babies were sacrificed to these false gods. When I lay out the details of it in the book, it's shocking. In the same way, we have a militant baby-killing spirit, a shout your abortion spirit. As we were electing a pro-life justice to the Supreme Court months back, there were women screaming and literally pounding on the Supreme Court doors. This is an attack on women. This is saying that the baby in the womb is not sacred. This is saying that motherhood is not sacred. And let's remember that when you start to have more and more abortions, say in countries like China and countries like India, you end up with a decreased female population because sons, boys are considered more valuable. So you now have gender selective abortions that kill more women than men in the womb. This really is an assault on women, and it is a demeaning of the dignity of womanhood in the midst of it.
Now, Dr. Brown, you point out in your book that in the Bible, a leader named Jehu was running a collision course with Jezebel, and you draw some interesting parallels with U.S. President Donald Trump, who's been strongly pro-life so far.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump is the most unlikely candidate to be the poster boy for the pro-life movement. And it's been so bizarre that so many evangelical Christians voted for him, but they felt, hey, he's going to represent our cause the best way. But again, whether you love Trump or loathe Trump, he is like a Jehu type figure. Jehu was not a politician. He was an outsider. and he was accused of being reckless, kind of fought with everyone, kind of a bull in the china shop. He did a lot of good, and there was a lot of collateral damage. I point out in the book how Orthodox Jewish writers, evangelical Christian writers have drawn the parallel between Jehu and Trump. And what it means, we're not saying that the Bible prophesied Donald Trump. What it's saying is when you get this type of aggressive alpha male bull in the china shop leader, that will bring Jezebel up to the surface. So I'm not saying that President Trump has done everything perfectly or that women can't have an issue with him. I'm saying that the militancy, the anger, the hatred, the violent nature of it, the out of control nature of it, it really is Jezebel in a confrontation with Jehu. And it's wild in the Bible that she first tries to seduce him. She paints her face. She's going to go about her old ways. And when that doesn't work, she kind of mocks him. And Jehu says, "Who's on my side?" And it says 2 or 3 eunuchs then throw her out of the window. Now, we're not talking about people. We don't want to hurt people. We're talking spiritually here. But it's interesting that the eunuchs who were castrated males are the ones who Jehu now emboldens to stand up against Jezebel. I mean, I think the parallels are pretty striking when you look at it.
Now, in your book, you note, and you talked about this a bit earlier, that there are a number of surveys showing that there's an increase in religions such as Wicca or witchcraft. Should we really be concerned about that right now?
Yeah, you know, I wrote a brand new article that just came out today, Witches Everywhere. And what's striking me is not just the rise in the number of witches, but the rise in the popularity of witchcraft. Now, some of it, you know, they say, well, we just use our magic to better people and things like that. But others are putting hexes on the patriarchy and cursing the president on a daily basis. And what's interesting is one of the pioneer feminist movements in the 1960s, one of the pioneer feminist organizations had an acronym that when you spelled it out was WITCH. There really is something to this. And I think we'd be fooling ourselves to close our eyes and say there's nothing to it. I got a call on my radio show today from a pastor in Oklahoma and said they were doing door-to-door evangelism, talking to people about Jesus. He said they didn't run into a single atheist on their blocks, but they ran into 4 witches. This should get our attention.
Now, with all of the moral challenges in Western society, has there also been a level of compromise within the Christian church? How should we really respond to this as individuals and as the global church?
Yeah, there's been a lot of compromise. I mean, look, there are problems with the law in Canada, in America. There's banning of some of our material. We're accused of being guilty of hate speech and things like that. We could list our grievances, but let's be honest, no one's putting a gun to our head. No one is throwing us in prison and torturing us, yet this is happening to our brothers and sisters around the world, and they're not backing down. They're standing for Jesus, even if it means being beheaded, and we're afraid to stand for Jesus if it means being unfriended. So we need to go back to Scripture, and we need to humble ourselves before God and say, Father, I'm sorry for being a wimp. I'm sorry for failing to speak out. I'm sorry for disguising my compromise to look like compassion. And with love and truth, I'm going to stand. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said the ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to our children. And we, leaders, moms, dads, educators, business people, wherever we are, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of world are we leaving to our children?
So what issues are the biggest concern to you right now when you look at the state of our young people?
When I look at the state of our young people, they have very little consciousness of the God of the Bible. They have very little understanding of the real Christian message. They often associate Christianity with bigotry and hatred. They look at it as something that is completely antiquated. And because they're not finding the answers they're looking for, and they're increasingly isolated, social media, instead of creating more community, is really isolating more. There's more depression. Drug abuse continues to be a problem. People at younger and younger ages getting exposed to graphic sexual material. This has a negative effect on children as they grow and develop. There's a sense of lack of purpose, lack of destiny. Why am I here? What am I doing? It's a ripe time for followers of Jesus to seize the moment and say, this is the message, this is what it's all about. But unfortunately here too, we've often lost the younger generation, and just fighting for traditional values will not do it. We need to bring young people into a fresh encounter with God himself.
Do you believe our nations can be restored? Will we see a revival in both the United States and Canada?
We can. It's not guaranteed. We can, but we need to get desperate. The last 2 chapters of Jezebel's War with America, I explain how to defeat Jezebel on a personal level and how to defeat Jezebel on a national level. We must get desperate. We can't be complacent. We need to get on our knees and cry out to God for mercy. We need to take stock of our own lives. We need to get involved in the culture around us. It's not too late for North America, but it's getting later by the hour. And we could really lose a whole generation. We could have a moral and cultural collapse that will be very difficult to rebuild from. So it's not too late. The promise remains. God wants to move, but it's going to call for greater urgency on our part.
Dr. Michael Brown, author of the new book coming out in August entitled Jezebel's War with America. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.